Hey everyone, Kyle Andrew Hilton Wine and Spirits here to tell you about our upcoming beer tasting for Wednesday, August the 3rd, and
you're not gonna want to miss this one.
we have Blind Enthusiasm. Now, I know it's become a bit of a meme that I keep saying, hey, this is a brewery I've been wanting to talk about for a while. But this one I really have. Blind Enthusiasm is Edmonton's answer to Cabin or Establishment or Annex or 88 or any of the other big Instagram-worthy breweries. This is a brewery that doesn't do a lot of big social media promotions, but what they do is incredible brewing. This is a very much a cult hit. This is one of those breweries that in Edmonton you can't find anywhere, not because people don't want it, but because it sells out so damn fast. We are so lucky to have it here, and we're doubly lucky because we're going to have a guest from Blind Enthusiasm for this one. Now we got 4 beers in front of us. We've got the Ricecutters lager, which is like a very easy drinking rice lager. We won't dwell on this one. Let's move on to the other 3. The Hazy Z, German-style wheat beer. So a big, spicy, zippy, heavy Hefeweizen. Lots going on here. Very fresh, very bright, lightly tart. This is going to be a really great summer beer, exactly the type of summer beer I like, the type of wheat beer I like. Then we got Haze Z. Stupid name, let's be very honest, but it's the base beer of the Zesty Z, and then they add Nelson Sauvin, Citra, Chinook, and they make a very big, bright, white IPA-ish, hazy IPA-ish. It's kind of in the middle, and I really like that it's not really one style or the other. It's going to be really fun. And then finally, we're going to finish with the extra special Monk, so an ESB, but with Belgian yeast, Trappist-style yeast. So very different, very fun, kind of a offbeat brewery that we've been trying to get for like more than a year here. Yeah, I'm really jazzed for this one. All that and more coming up Wednesday, August the 3rd at 6 o'clock. We'll see you then.
Media Boutique.
We are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Wednesday night beer tasting series, and one that I hope I didn't hype up too much. Well, it's Blind Enthusiasm, and I am so stoked for this one. Oh, I've wanted to do this for so long. I believe you were making fun of me for saying jazzed multiple times in the promo. Yes, I am jazzed, and I am joined by Greg Zestchak from Blind Enthusiasm Brewing. He is, as he has clarified, the owner, not the brewer, but maybe there. Greg, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us from your holiday tasting in California.
Yeah, I'm in Southern California right now, and yeah, my brother lives here, and I kind of come every summer, and always been amazed at new breweries. Now I brought our beers down to Southern California, so we could taste them, which is kind of fun. But yeah, I'm actually really excited to do this. It was something we wanted to do for a while, and after we first dropped off some beer a couple months back, I think something we'll be doing more often. That's the plan, at least.
Yes, it is. Because right now we're in the dog days of summer where our attendance is lower, but this was still 1 4-pack hell out. I'm pretty excited about. So sold out just about to the top. So for all of you watching at home, we do have a tasting order tonight. We are going to do the Zesty, followed by the Ricecutter Lager, followed by the extra special Monk, and finally by the Haze, which I'll be very honest, was not the tasting order I picked, but I'm willing to admit when I was wrong. But yeah, let's get some Zesties in our glasses. Greg, why don't you tell us a little bit about the brewery, or I guess should I say brewery, because it's multiple now.
Yeah, so we've been operating about 5 years. Actually, this fall will be our 5-year anniversary, and we do 2 really main types of beer. I mean, really, let's call it 3 actually. One is, I got the Zesty Z here, obviously. Oh, everything's reversed in the camera, so I'm confused. But this is magically the correct way. And I'm doing the trick to not show the glassware. You can probably see this is actually a California brewery called Barley Forge. You always try and hide the glassware in the back, but I didn't have any of my own here. We've been off about 5 years, focused mainly on sort of clean beers like lagers and ales, barrel-aged beers, meaning ones that we finish fermentation on and put into barrel, and then mixed ferment and spontaneous beers, which we do at the Monolith. Those are ones that go into it and ferment in the barrel, so we call them barrel fermented. So clean beer, barrel aged, barrel fermented, 3 main things. Today we're going to be tasting a number of the clean beers, but the store also has some of the other beers as well. So
yeah, so we'll talk about those in time.
Yeah, so Zesty Z is actually one of the we've made. I was making a kissing motion on the screen there. One of the first beers we've done, and probably brewed the most. It's a summer. We call it almost like a summer wheat ale. Nice, like very traditional, like German style wheat with that banana and clove. We brewed a little lighter. So it's about 4.5%. Usually they're over 5. So we brewed a little lighter, more for a patio style. And not only do you have the banana and clove, you get a bit of other sort of like light tart fruit. You want some tartness in the finish as well, so you can do that really refreshing character. So
I really like that the
Crystal's
banana and clove is. Sometimes it just comes off as it's so much banana and clove it almost comes off as like double bubble.
Yeah.
I appreciate the note here, but it's just a dominant. I think some of not just the Germans themselves, but some varieties of this. I've also want to ask a question. Like for us, we've noticed that sometimes selling like German style, like Hazy, can be a little challenging. Like that's kind of become a style where I think 10 years ago with Grasshopper, that used to be like an entry level style. Now Hefeweizen or cloudy wheat ales in general have become a beer geek style. How has this gone over for you?
It's interesting. I would say that within our we have a restaurant and taproom and restaurant beer. It's very popular summer beer. I think it's funny because I think we find that it's just people love it, and so they go and buy it. So we sell a lot at the door. We feel that are familiar. I can totally see how it's not something that you go and seek in stores. It's become like, let's call them crazy styles, and we don't do a lot of those. That's really not our personal style.
Apparently, we have to call Greg back. That's all right. It happens. Calling us from California. Sometimes the line just. But I did want to just touch on something you're talking about because I think it's a critical. Hey, you're back.
Yeah, sorry, I'm gonna change menus to give you a tour around my house because for whatever reason it's being difficult. So let me so I'll go over here. I may have had like not great connection there, and I want to fix that because that kind of sucks for everyone. So let's stay here.
I'm already getting less. I say just as it froze. That's all right.
I'm not supposed to go to a light. Actually, I'm breaking the rules, and I'll go over here then. So, there we go. Not towards a window.
Yeah, if it works, we'll deal with the lighting issues.
Yeah, no, I got this now. There we go.
Oh.
Sorry about that. We succeed because people try it, and it's very approachable. It's a really nice drinking beer. So when it's that nice drinking beer, people like it. So that's what matters.
I appreciate that you're not just, and no slight on brewery. You have great brewery friends that have any hazy IPAs. I'm really grateful to see that like this has a hazy IPA, but A, it's not focus, and B, it's just one of many. I like that there are differences, things, some styles that are maybe less done, and that are. I'm never going to say I'm going to get tired of IPA. I've been IPA to the bone since about 1998. Sharp-eyed viewers remember as younger than I was, Frank, but gloss right over that. But yeah, I mean, I'm never going to get tired of IPA myself, but like as a store, as like a beer enthusiast in a broader sense of it, I love seeing it take it to a different place and do something just.
So I can talk to that in a funny way. So I'm in Southern California. I'm in the ocean's not too far. I'm in sort of between LA and San Francisco in Orange County, and there's a store I go to all the time, and It's great. It's got amazing collection stuff. I got some Russian River. I got some some stuff from Bottle Logic. They're quite regional, but some really neat beers. But 95% of what they have on the shelf are different hazies, single, double, triple from local breweries, which are great. But I actually went and talked to the owner and said I actually want to try some local lagers because I still like it's 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 summer. I want refreshment. Give me a local lager. And so I pulled out a couple. There was three local lagers out of a store that had um, five giant cabinets of beer, of coolers. And so I was just like, wow, that's testimony. And I get it. Like, I mean, and it's pretty popular. I'm not trying to, like, I do drink them. I did buy some of the stuff that I'm excited about. But it was kind of funny that, you wouldn't find a saison. You couldn't shake a stick and find the saison. It's still a delicious beer. It's just, I think, things change. There's trends. I mean, lagers became quite popular, so I was expecting more lagers there. But yeah, no wheat beers, no sir, unless they were hopped up, which is like our Haze Z. But
See, and I find that so interesting that, like, now that IPA is mainstream, the rebels are brewing anything but, and I love that side of it. And now I feel like I'm just, the pumpkin spice latte drinker. And yes, I know that IPA is just pumpkin spice latte. I know that, but I still enjoy it. I love that we're going to something different. And now that we're talking lagers, let's dive into the rice cutter here.
Right, and in my brilliance of changing locations, I left my beers behind, so I'll be back in 1 moment. Just give me 1 second.
Well, this is very definitely an Andrew Hilton beer tasting. Until a dog shows up and steals one of the beers, then it's officially an Andrew Hilton beer tasting. Is my audio cutting out?
Well, I just made some adjustments. I
Okay.
think it's okay, but
Hopefully it's okay.
yeah.
I'm almost back. Don't worry, I'm here. I come. I switched from the concrete bunker with the nice lighting to the open room with the maybe okay lighting, but
Yeah, it looks like you're living in a really nice place right at the minute. So
yeah, it's my brother's place in California. So, and yeah, so like it's nice again I have some friends down here from my video gaming days, so I have a lot of colleagues that get into trouble at breweries which is great. So, Ricecutters. Ricecutters. So Ricecutters is a lager that we brewed with a collaboration really with Woodcutter's Blanket. Woodcutter's Blanket, you might be familiar with, is a well-known. Woodcutter's Blanket is a well-known cocktail bar in Yukon, in Whitehorse, and Woodcutter's Brewing is our new brewery. And our head brewer at the market in Edmonton, Rob Monk, was the head brewer of Yukon Brewing for many years. One of his colleagues actually left to start this brewery, so his colleague came down, Scott Saylor, and they brewed this rice lager together. And so rice lager, but also dry hopped. So we dry hopped it. Really nice and clear. Like it's about 40% rice, if I remember correctly. Light. And what's interesting about it is, like, again, when you lower the malt character, you can get away with lower hops. So our hop characteristic in this is fairly low, or our dosing, but we still fairly prominent. I think it was Mandarina Bavaria and Lemon Drop. It kind of gives it like a little like the citrus fruity kind of little note, but we needed very little. That was actually one of the interesting things about this one is like we dosed it very, very, it's called gingerly, and we still got like lots of character. So dry hop lager is something we love, and we had it in Germany when we were there. A lot of the young German brewers were doing that, and so we decided to do that.
Now I'm gonna dial us back a little bit here. Past all the complaints about our audio, because wouldn't be a tasting without complaints about the audio, Aaron. And Craig asks, what are the challenges with making a wheat-style ale? And again, with the understanding that you're not a brewer, and neither am I, beyond probably some home brewing things, or at least you're not the head brewer.
No, and I don't brew, but I'm there all the time, and I know kind of what it entails. I mean, I think you touched on it earlier, which was getting that balance of like, there's things you can do, like you can step at a certain temperature to create more ferulic acid, which creates more of the banana characteristics. So you can actually do things during your mash to actually enhance or change the type of wheat beer you make. Secondarily, wheat can sometimes cause stuck mashes, so there's technical problems. I seem to have frozen again. There we go.
You were frozen for a sec, but we're back.
But yeah, so it's not a problem as much as, but it's again, you can't hide anything. It's a very subtle style, and so you have to dial it very closely to what you're trying to accomplish. And if you get it wrong, it's pretty obvious.
Yeah, there's nowhere to hide with lagers. You make a huge mistake, it's going to show up in a huge way.
Yeah, same with wheat beers. Like they have, while they have some fruit characteristic and some unique flavors, they're also very, very, like, just, it's all there. There's nothing to hide.
Well, let's talk a little bit about like mistakes and cross-contamination, because you actually have two entirely separate brew houses to prevent the risk of cross-contamination. Do you want to talk about the two different breweries and like why they're separate and like what they each specialize in, and like do you have completely different staff? Do they have to change clothes before they go one to the other and back?
So I would say we don't change clothes. You can't use the same footwear in each. We change footwear. So we have two breweries. One brewery called the Monolith, which does all our mixed ferment and spontaneous beer. And you have to make the assumption in that brewery that there's bacteria and various types of wild yeast in there that will actually spoil a typical beer. We've actually even spoiled our own attempts at a relatively clean Brett lager. So I think you may have the 86 lager. You have the 86 lager. That was supposed to be just Brett and lager yeast that was going to be nice and clean, but got a little bit acidified. So even within, the great care we took, we still had that problem. So that's the 86 there, for example.
Yeah.
So, and so really it's separating, like with beer, the contamination is a lot of what people do in beer in terms of the process and technique is to minimize the chance of having any kind of contamination, like cooling quickly, like putting your yeast in really fast, and like using sterile techniques. So it's just, we decided to separate. It's much easier than having different sets of hoses. And then, for the barrel fermenting program, those beers are very, very sensitive. They sit for like let's say a year in a barrel. It's finished beer. There's still a little bit of sugar in there. Let's give it say 2.5 gravity, so 2.5% roughly. And so, like, if something gets in there, it could actually take off. So you're always being incredibly careful. Like, you can't go in, like, actually, typically you don't go from the Monolith into the clean barrel room. That's the case, we just don't do it. Like, if you've been in the Monolith that day, you don't change your clothes. In theory, you could change them, but we just don't go in there that day. We have two different sets of staff. Doug Chikney is the head brewer at the Monolith. Rob Monk is the head brewer at the Market. Rob does the barrel-aged beers and all the clean beers. Doug does the spontaneous and the mixed ferments. So kind of is running two operations at the same time. And there's a little bit of, once they're in the bottle, we can cross them over. We can kind of put them back and forth. And once, like, we have a clean line at the Monolith of Market beers. And we do stuff to kind of like co-promote, but they really do operate separately.
And yet they operate under the same ban. For people down here, it's. I'm sure if you're in Edmonton, it's like, well, there's the Monolith and the Market. They're completely different. Why would you ever think they were the same? But down here, people just see the Blind Enthusiasm name. It's like, oh, it's the same brewery.
Yeah, and that's actually the same in Edmonton too. Like, I've done a terrible job. No, it's complicated, right? Like, it's kind of like you always have this sort of like challenge between that. So we kind of worry about it almost on a product by product basis. We're all the same family. It's not like Rob and Doug and we work together closely all the time. So we are the same umbrella. That's why we decided to go just one Instagram account and one kind of brand, because we want them to support each other, the brands and the different beers. So it is two entirely separate operations, but like there's tons of crossover. Like, one of the fun things we did, for example, at the Monolith, we put in a classic English cask pull style, but we only pour casks from the Market, so only clean beer casks go in that machine, because you don't want to infect it, so you can't never put clean beer in there again. So it's kind of like, so we do all these things that are kind of like co-promoting all the time, and people get confused. They also, to make it more confusing, we have the restaurant Bira, which isn't a tap room, and people kind of point out that, hey, this is a really crappy tap room because it's like, table service and really fancy, and it's like, it's actually kind of fancy, and we didn't do a good job explaining that to people. So people initially in the brewing space were kind of confused as to what we're doing, when we really wanted to have like show a nice restaurant with beer, and I can have a great meal, and I don't have to have wine with a great meal.
That is the most first world problems complaint I've ever heard. oh no,
Yes,
this tap room just doesn't have like shitty pretzels and pepperoni sticks. They have real food and table service. What a terrible crime this is. What are they doing?
and I totally get that, but I also get customer expectation because they go in expecting
I do
one
too.
thing and they feel like, yeah, but I also simultaneously completely agree with you because I'm kind of like, like that should be obvious, but I get it. I mean, it's our job to sort of make sure people have the opportunity to understand what we're doing. So,
No, so this
rice
is
cutter.
this is wonderful. I'm really excited to get to try these like with you because this is something I think I mentioned I've wanted to do for a long time. This is very much one of those tastings that to a point kind of takes me back to the start of doing these like 2 years ago when I was like, hey, let's try doing wine tastings, and they did really well. It's like, well, let's do beer tastings on Wednesdays. And then they did really well, and I started just like calling breweries, be like, hey, would like you somebody like to show up and talk to me for like an hour? And everybody started saying yes, and this is the first one I've really been super excited about in a long time. So thank you for coming.
So I was going to comment just really quickly on the rice cutters. Even though you read rice lager and you think there's not much going on, I mean that's kind of like a malt subtlety, but like I find the hops give it almost a nice pithy, like it's almost like a pithiness. It's not a straight up citrus blast like a citra hopped beer, but the Bavarian and the lemon drop give it like this pithiness that kind of like complements. And like I said, I think well, typically, for the nerds out there, we have a hop gun. So a hop gun actually is this chamber that will recirculate. So for we do 10 hex a time or 1,000 liters, we recirculate as little as 2.5 kilograms of hops through this thing and get kind of very nice hop expression. I think this one used about a kilogram, the rice cutters. And it still has like, fragrant, fresh hops because just that kind of like the subtlety that there's no counterbalancing malt significantly to reduce the characteristics of the hops in this. So yeah, I mean, it's a nice beer. Rob came up with it with Scott, and then we actually sent some up to Whitehorse, so that was actually another fun thing. 5 or 6 flats went up there, and so they're selling it. Our beer's being sold in Whitehorse, which is great fun. We always love stuff like that happening, and it was like they're really great people to work with too, so it was good fun.
Awesome. Let's move on to the extra special monk here. Now this is the beer that I was really excited to try tonight. This was one I think is the most fun for me anyway. Because it pours so pale, but it tastes so much darker to me.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because there is a little tiny bit of darker malt in here. Rob always sneaks in like some kind of Vienna or some Munich or something that we don't use we seldom, I mean the rice cutter did, but seldom use 100% pale malts. So in other words, we're always like he's always playing with the malts in the beer, and this is actually to call out further on this one particularly. Extra special monk, Rob Monk. This is basically named after Rob, the head brewer, and it was the first beer that Rob, the head brewer at the market, Doug, the Monolith head brewer, and me kind of collaborated on. Actually, we had a pilot system that we did the first batch, and it was delicious. It's hopped with Mosaic and Eldorado. We wanted like tropical and also citrus kind of, and a bit of dankness. Like you get a little bit of dankness from the Mosaic as well. Again, but like it's probably pale ale strength. Like we don't. Like this one, we actually were doing a lagerized version of this for a while too, and we still will do that, but we kind of like wanted to do like showing the lager was very clean, whereas this one had like that sort of like the juicy fruity notes, like again, but not excessive. We're not trying to like make haze boys. There's obviously these are like a bit of haze in this. It's kind of like cloudy.
Well, it's an unfiltered beer too.
It's not chewy, so.
So you mentioned this was something you'd brewed on your pilot system. It sounds like something that was very early. What was your launch beer lineup, and how many are still core beers for you?
So it's funny. Zesty Z was one. Extra Special Monk was one. Fab Hellas, which is or Fabulous. It's a like Hellas style lager. That one was done. So at the market we have a German brewery, brew house I should say, from a company called Braucon. Braucon is in southern Bavaria. So it was a electric fired system that the electricity heats water makes a big electrode that heats water under pressure versus actually an electrode inside the vessel. If you have an electrode in the vessel, it works to heat, but it gets really gummed up and unclean. So we wanted to kind of have that separate. So it's just a clean tank that actually the electrode heats the water. And then I think the other one was one called Deb, which was sort of short for delicious English bitter, Deb. So we had an English bitter. You talked about wheat beers being a hard sell.
English bitter. You know, this is a bitter-loving crowd. I had more people ask me if Extra Special Monk was an ESB than you would believe.
Unfortunately, it's not. It was kind of like maybe. I mean, it's not at all. Like, I mean, I know my bitters. I've had the good fortune to travel there and drink them on cask in many times in England. But no, I think it. Deb, however, was, and I think Deb was one that like it was. You know, and it's really sad because like the people that like bitters, like we had a couple like beer judge types and others that came there to drink, and they're like, man, it's just this nails it. My English friends would come and go like, this is so reminds me of home. But I think we're within Edmonton at the time very much caught up in the the beer hype machine was starting to build, and so like hazes were starting and etc. So it just was not as popular. It wasn't something, even though it was really great to drink and did well with food, it just wasn't something that people wanted to buy. And it's just like you got to kind of be realistic and kind of pursue things that you could push it a certain degree, and people still make some really great ones, but they're still pretty tough to sell and kind of rare. I'd like to drink them, but.
So how would you categorize this? I mean, I'd say English pale into American pale. Like, it's sweeter, I think, than Sierra Nevada pale, but it's more bitter than a lot of English pales.
Therein lies the reason we don't typically do styles, because we don't brew. No, and it's because because we're like almost everything we do, and the next one even the most of all, the Haze Z is the maximum style blaster. It's like nothing we do ever, and it's not to be like to say, oh, we don't do them because we can't or we think we're too cool. It's just we like to make these kind of hybrids, and just feel like style. And I think style has a real purpose though in explaining what to expect. So in other words, like sometimes we'll describe like, hey, yeah, it's kind of like you're just hey, it's a little bit like an English pale, a little bit like but with American hops, and it's kind of reminiscent of that. But I mean, you're starting to get into this really narrow group of people that would understand what you're saying as well, because it's kind of like you're mixing subparts of obscure styles together, and that's why the whole thing I think has become kind of funny, because there's no one that governs how styles are actually applied or used, and so there's many beers that are totally confusing as to what they are. And if you say they're one thing and they're something else, then I mean consumers get confused. But we come back to like everything drinkable, high drinkability. We tend to hedge. This is a great example. A little hoppy, a little citrus, pine, like tropical. One of those is usually a prominent part of our beers. We do some malt forward beers though, like Lager of Darkness. Hopefully when we do this again in the future, we'll have Lager of Darkness because it's a very, very good malt forward beer. Next, we actually have a couple malt forward beers on our next canning run too. So lots of but again, like they're all over the place in terms of style, but they taste good. So and they're highly.
Well, we have a little bit left of the Nordlichter, like 3-4 packs. But hey, people who want to get here first thing in the morning tomorrow might get a little bit. So you definitely do some malt forward beers. I think we have.
Yeah.
Maybe 4 or 5 of the Come Me Bro, if that.
Come Me Bro. Yeah, that's Come Me Bro is a really tasty beer. Like I think it was that not this batch. The batch prior was like got a bronze in the Alberta Brewing Awards, and I know some of the it's a really we do malt forward pretty well. I mean again, I'm not the brewer and I'm also very biased, but I feel like we do malt forward. I think the trick to malt forward it's not excessively sweet. I mean sometimes you can have a little sweetness in there, and it actually, if it's too dry, it maybe detracts, but there's a real fine balance in there to making sure you got malt with a bit of dryness, and that makes a huge difference. Nordlichter for me is like, I'm very biased about all my beers, but that one for me is a phenomenal beer. Like it's a super dry, like you said, malts, that doughy malt, but then like a little tiny Pilsner style bite with the hops, and it's just like, if I was if you made me only drink one beer for a year, that'd be that one. Just because it's also a very beery beer. Like I joke around like, hey, give me the beer that tastes like what you think of as beer. That's the one. That one and Fabulous are the two that we do that are very.
Yeah, if you go to the wrong type of bar, you get Budweiser with that though. I've stopped asking that question unless I know who I'm asking it to.
Well, and the funny thing about that though too, honestly, with Nordlichter, like so that's a 3.5% beer. Like it is super low ABV and probably consequently super low calorie. We don't test it, we don't know, but is also very dry, so there just can't be many calories in it. And you're like, that's the flavor profile one could have in a light beer, in a class like of light beers. And they go, instead we got Coors Light, Bud Light with no flavor. I'm just like, I'm glad they don't try and make flavor, because you can have a really tasty beer at low ABV or low, like, session strength, or even low session strength. But fortunately, the big guys don't do that, because otherwise we'd be in trouble.
And they can't. I mean, do you remember Molson 67 IPA? They God knows they made one. They spent the money. They bought the packaging, probably much more packaging than they used, and it probably all ended up in a landfill. But no, they tried Molson 67 IPA, which was shitty 67 calorie lager that vaguely smelled maybe like it had seen a hop cone once.
I had one of their more recent ones, like I can't remember if it's them or one of the other big guys, but they were doing this new hop beer, and I'm like, it's very meh. And they were like,
I mean, they have to be.
Experience. And they just don't know. They don't get it. So.
And the other thing I will say is I was actually talking to somebody, probably 18 months ago now, who'd actually worked at a bigger brewery before they started their own. I'm struggling with who it was. It might have been the guys from Great Lakes. They were saying that, like, yeah, they couldn't do an IPA on those breweries because they don't have any room for, like, the foam up when you add hops. It would actually break the boiler because they didn't build in that space, because they never planned to add hops to the point where the beer would foam as it was boiling.
But after the fact, as an extract, like, this is the thing, is like those beers are high gravity brewed and then constructed by like chemicals after the fact. You know what I mean? So you're right. Exactly. That's absolutely the case. So it's a different focus. It's a product marketing focus versus a product first. Like, what we create, we love, we drink, we enjoy. We drink everything we make, and it's always funny because I think whatever the new thing is always the most favorite for the next week or two till something else comes. And we rotate quite a lot, so we put a lot of stuff straight into keg that doesn't go very far. But I mean, and canning though, like we're always almost like 2 brands of something interesting every canning run. Something different is fun.
Aaron, we got a question that it plays to your strengths. Can we get a really dramatic, like, camera pan?
Sure.
Yeah, so Craig asked, do we get any of the barrel stuffed here? Yes, and I even put them out in advance for exactly this sort of question. Aaron was so mad at me because he was all ready to shoot the promo for next week, and I just, like, disappeared and took the mic off and went and got these bottles. And he was like, but we were going to shoot the promo. What are you doing? Why are you doing it like this? He was so mad. It was great.
So that's like a mixture of the two, right? So you've got like
it is.
So if you look at them, so the one way to tell between the two styles is you look at the front of the label, and if the little kind of diamond is cut out, that's barrel fermented. So that's from the monolith. And then you turn one of the other bottles, you see it's like kind of on the side. Like if you turn any of those, like the working overtime, if you give that a turn. Oh, next one over. Give that a turn. Oh, that one, yeah. Turn it.
Yeah,
look at the side,
that's got it.
like
You're probably also on a tape delay, so.
Yeah. So that's got like the side cut sort of thing. So, so these are and it says it on there as well. So well,
now I can't see these guys.
So these are, and this is a great sampling of what we offer. Kind of, and it's always changing. Like we have like 3 new barrel aged beers, whiskey barrel. Coming out in fall, and then we got more monolith beers. We have actually our first spontaneous, and it's really funny. When I came down there, I think I was chatting with I think it was Devin, and he was saying that there's quite a history of Cantillon and sort of barrel.
No comment on Cantillon.
Our first spontaneous, I'm saying, yeah. Doug worked at Cantillon. That's why we were making them. So he actually learned his skill set there. So, we're hopeful that his spontaneous beers will be sort of at least reminiscent and, made in Alberta, which is pretty wild. And the crazy thing with that kind of stuff is, hey, it's all local microbes. Like it's the stuff you have here, like Substantially Complete Knows, we pitch the microbes we think are the ones that we have in the spontaneous, but then we'll be having like the real ones from the spontaneous. And we actually are doing a scientific sort of study with the University of Alberta and National Research Council to learn what actual microbes are in the barrels at different times. And so we'll be able to kind of probably even brew very similar to spontaneous beers in time by isolating them. And we're very, one of the things we talk about our brewery is like, I didn't really say, but it was like, traditional methods, but using modern scientific techniques. So we use all the tools at our disposal to do things in traditional ways, but then kind of, learning more at each step to try and improve upon it. That's a different flow. Like we have like a real vision to do that and try and make beers that we kind of like have great insight into and can recreate. So there you have it. Long story on that one, but
A little bit of a long story, but that's all right. I mean, people like the big long-winded speeches when people get really into what they're talking about. So we won't try to define that by style because I think that's a bit of a mugs game. Let's talk a little bit very briefly about what we have coming up next week. Next week, we've got a new brewery profile coming up. We're going to be talking about Big Spruce out of Nova Scotia. This is one that kind of came in as a surprise. I actually had something else in mind for next week, and then a new brewery with 4 beers just happened to launch into the market this week. So we're doing their Hotel Alpha Zulu Echo, so their hazy IPA. They're the Inhaled Affirmative Pilsner, so I like a good pils. We're doing the Kitchen Party Pale, and then finally the Tag Your It The Right IPA, which I assume is a West Coast IPA because West Coast IPA is the correct IPA, but yeah, I guess we'll see. I did try to get a guest earlier today, left a couple of voicemails, got nothing back yet. If we can have a guest, we will. But all of that coming up next week. Who knows? This could be an absolute dud. It could be the next brewery you see us having 8 shelf facings of. I don't know yet, but I'm really excited to find out.
It's organic.
And it's organic, which I don't really want to talk about because it doesn't mean a whole lot if you're talking about Canada versus Europe. It's a really loosey-goosey designation here. I don't like organic in Canada. All right, back to the topic at hand. Haze Z.
yeah. So Haze Z was kind of like a again we do a lot of kind of fun experiments just to see what'll happen, and basically we said, well, what'll happen if we use like the same yeast, the traditional German Hefeweizen yeast, in a hazy beer, brewed in like the hazy IPA tradition. And so we actually, I think it's really funny because sometimes you think, oh, how did you figure out you would do it? It's like, well, we had a bunch of Galaxy and Enigma left over from a prior beer. And so like, well, we got to use the Galaxy Enigma because it's rare and expensive. So let's put it into like a hazy beer. And then, because that's obviously a very popular hop combination in those. And to do that also in, like we said, let's just not be the same as everyone else. Let's do it differently. And that was kind of the objective. So that's why it is. And so, it's a funny beer because like you definitely have like that bold hop. You have a nice, like the nice, very opaque. It's quite aggressively hopped even with our hop gun. And you get a lot of that, citrus and pine tropical notes. And I mean, in a way that almost really resinous as well, I find. But then you still, most people will find still a little bit of that sort of wheat beer character behind it somewhere. Not always.
I'd say more than a little. Yeah, the clove in particular. That that spicy banana clove for me is right there. The first second I take a sip, it's right there.
Yeah.
And I love that about it.
But then it almost enhances the bitterness a little bit. Like it's not super bitter. Like even if we're doing a hoppy beer, we don't aim to be super bitter. Like that's not our goal. So yeah, so it's kind of like it's this one's a fun one because then we want to say, well, let's do our take on it, and it's a different flavor profile. Because I mean, not to say that they all taste the same, but like I mean, when you're using the same 5 or 6 hops in various amounts, it's just not that. And they're they're using usually a London ale yeast and often maybe a clean or American ale, so a combination of yeast to get this sort of effect. It's just I think I find them they're hard to differentiate ultimately. So.
I think that's a very nice, polite way of putting it. They are hard to differentiate.
I have beer judged, so like I'm a like certified BJCP judge and all the rest, and so like I've been humbled many times, like rating beers that like I'm shocked when I discover what they were, and just you sort of like you make assumptions, then you put them beside each other, and you get surprised sometimes. And I think that's the thing is like we want to do something that if you did put in a lineup, you could probably pick it out of it. And that's on purpose because you go, not they wouldn't have that. You said that clovish note. And it's funny because it's not so much the banana, but definitely the clove comes forward. The banana gets kind of maybe melded into the fruit. The goal.
Yeah, I think it gets lumped in with the tropical fruit to a point because it kind of plays with the mango and the pineapple and everything else on the hopping, and it kind of gets lumped in with that. Sure, I still think I get it, but you're right. The clove is definitely the big hit.
And I think the thing we tried to make that, like those tropical fruit cups where they have a bunch of different fruits in there, and like a pear and an orange and a peach, and then you kind of like the banana piece, and like if you drank that whole thing, it could taste a little like this. It's kind of the goal. So yeah,
I can see like a dual fruit cup with that. Sure, yeah.
That's kind of the goal. I mean, every once in a while we'll make something go, oh, like we had one. Trying to remember what beer it was. It tasted just like cherry Coke, like identical to cherry Coke, and we were like, oops, what did we do? And like it was. I'm trying to remember what it was. There's a lot of lagers we did, and we're just like, oh man, and it changed a bit with time. So that's the other thing you find is, when you're, when something's fresh out of a tank or freshly canned, it'll kind of shift a little, but it was like, when you do something like that, you're like, oh, we didn't mean to make it taste like cherry Coke or a dual fruit cup, but it kind of does. But that's neat because it's different. I think for us, like, we're trying to be the non-trendy brewery, which was really funny when everyone started doing lagers, like, and we're like, oh, we were doing those from day one 5 years ago, and they became popular, and that was cool, but like, I kind of think that it's nice to be known for something and being consistent about it. Like, we'll always, every batch we can, or there's always like 1 to 3 lagers on. Like, it's something we like to do.
It's funny. It was something I was going to comment on when we first started talking about the Ricecutter, and then we got talking about something else, and it skipped my mind. Is like, you had a lager as like a launch beer. That's insane.
Yeah.
Nobody has a lager as a launch beer.
Well, I think I was fortunate, and we were fortunate that we had experienced brewers that had made them before. I think maybe what the reason you're seeing lagers becoming popular now is people need to, their skills need to develop to bone up to be able to do them, because they're not easy to make, and so they have to kind of like, build up their skills, build up their experience, and then once they're confident. And then the other thing too is interesting is, I mean, they're time consuming from a production perspective. It's like, if you want to crank out beers, if you want to take lagers, a real slow one. And so we always elected to sort of like be willing to take the time, like, 2-month lagering phase for these, because it's just like, it just gets better. And you can do them faster, but they lose the sort of that clean characteristic of a lager if you do them too fast. Like 6 weeks, probably the minimum you can lager, and you can kind of get away maybe a little bit when you do Keller beer, like the sort of like hazy style ones, or Keller pills or something. But even then, it's just nice. You can kind of tell when it's done too fast.
So for down here, people can get the beers here, but if they want to come see you, what's the best place to come and try your beers if they want to try the whole range?
So I think it's almost, you need to go both to the Monolith and to Bira. So Bira being, Bira, I sort of stopped for a second there. So I would say, like, Bira has like all the clean beers, and often, like, the other thing that we often have is we often have barrel-aged beers on tap, which is, at first we were like, well, and barrel-aged being like the bourbon barrel or the brandy barrel, like, how popular will these be? It turns out they're really popular. People really like barrel-aged beers on tap, which is logical when you think of like the tradition of like Belgian beers. Like, Belgian beers are these high ABV, very rich, like the Belgian Trappist and related kind of beers. And so that's the Bira is the one place for like the range of beers and some nice food. The Monolith gives you that very much a focused view of the mixed ferment and the spontaneous beers. Spontaneous, like I said, hopefully this fall we'll start pouring those. But lots being packaged and lots being set down right now. It takes about 6 months to bottle condition using our system. So
awesome. Well, Greg, thank you so much.
Yeah.
We will see you again in the fall. Yeah.
Yeah, no,
So-
actually, we'll definitely want to continue on this, this wonderful relationship, and keep talking about our beers with you guys. It's really fun.
And someday here, hopefully soon, we'll have you in person, and it'll be a real fun time.
Yeah, well, it was so close that one time, and it was sad. But I think we'll definitely pull that off. It's not far.
We'll
I mean, there's
we'll
no
find a way to connect, do a
Yeah,
bottle
yeah.
share. It'll be a good time.
Oh yeah.
And
bottle
actually, it'll
share.
be. I want to do like a customer bottle share where like we just open the store. Well, we close the store, and then people can come in the back door with things that they have definitely bought within the province of Alberta to share with everyone.
Yep.
But yeah, we'll figure something out like that another time. Awesome.
Yeah. No. Absolutely. Well, thanks. I really appreciate
Yeah.
it. It's been wonderful.
Thank you.
All the
And
best. Okay, bye.
good night. And
Yeah,
good night to all of you as well.
Bye-bye.
Have a wonderful rest of your evening, and we'll see you
Yeah,
next
thanks,
week.
folks. Enjoy the beers.
Good night.
Bye.